Hi, I'm Jim. Welcome to the Unbound Performance Podcast, where we explore the world of sports and performance mindset training.
And I'm Caroline. Each week we talk about the strategies, habits, and mental framework that help us to excel. Let's get into today's episode. All right, so I thought we could talk about transition from sport to life, or sport to no sport, or sport to work, whatever that looks like, whether that's because you graduated and your career's over, or you were great in high school and passionate and didn't play in college, or maybe an injury ended your career, like all the reasons why you might shift from athlete to new identity and how to make that not be a major identity crisis when the time comes.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. I was thinking about it because I was talking with some friends last night. Whatever we were talking about, it made me think, oh, that would be a good podcast episode, switching from this, one
Moving
identity.
from one stage in life to the next.
That's a much better way to put it than an identity crisis. But I think that's what happens for a lot of athletes is you are so identified by your sport and by like Caroline, the volleyball player, for so long that if you don't know how to pick and pull those skills from your sport and then transition them into a new environment, or whole separate category, your purpose and your identity, understanding what that is outside your sport before that transition comes, it can be really hard to shift into understanding how to still feel like you're getting that competitive edge that you want, how to understand your relationship with exercise and dieting, how to think about, working with a team in the workforce rather than a team on the court. I think there's just a lot of facets of that transition and how to sort of prepare for that.
Yeah, and I think we have to be really honest. There is no way, nice, you're going to approximate the level of intensity in a competitive environment. And that's why people want to play as long as they can, whether it's from high school to college to pros, and pros for as long as possible. We can talk about identity and purpose and worth, and I think all of those things are really important, but it's going to be jarring when you stop playing a sport on a competitive level.
And regardless of your foundation in those things like purpose and identity, it's going to be like, whether you've done all of the things that we've talked about in other episodes and we'll do more deep dives on, like, even if you are so skilled at those things and so honed in on them, like, it's still going to be a big life change on the person, on the mind, on, like, everything is going to be different. And like you said, you can't approximate that in any other environment.
I mean,
can't make it up.
I mean, if you think of a professional athlete, someone who's like Joe Montana or Tom Brady, when they were running out in the Super Bowl, like 100,000 plus people there watching, millions watching around the world. I mean, everything's on the line.
Sure.
Yeah. When you retire, guess what?
Never going to feel that again.
There's nothing close. No. And I think that's why it's really important to know that can't be the ultimate thing you're chasing in your life.
Right.
Because when you are done, then what?
Right.
And there was a couple of famous examples. Like when Joe DiMaggio retired, center fielder for the Yankees, and he was married to Marilyn Monroe, and they were overseas. She heard all these people cheering and basically suggested that he couldn't really relate to that, and he certainly could. And he made sure she knew that. But those days were over for him. Mm-hmm. I don't think he liked it very much. Mickey Mantle had this quote, "It was all I lived for, to play baseball." And then when he was done, he was in his late 30s and he's finished.
Yeah.
And
you have more than half your life left at that point. Like, if that's what you're living for and that's done, then literally what are you living for?
Yeah, and he really struggled afterwards. And I think that's where, we don't do a great job in the process of preparing people to be able to land on their feet.
Right. Let alone the ones that come suddenly, like an injury or like something that's going to end it abruptly, rather than knowing that, okay, this is my last match, or this is, my last year. Like, I think I talked on a different podcast, but I very vividly recall walking off the court for the last time and literally thinking, like, what now? Like, I mean, I had graduation coming. I had a job lined up. Like, I knew what in life came next. But I remember, other games, whether you win or you lose, it's like, all right, we have another one next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And it was such a drastic way to end a game. And also at the same time realize that my career was over and not have anything, at the end of the season, okay, well, then we'll come back in August. Like, something's upcoming, but it was the first time that nothing was coming up. And for so long, from having played club to high school to state championships for high school and tryouts for club or the next day, it was just this never-ending cycle for 8-9 years for me. And then I had this game, and it didn't occur to me that I was going to feel different, but I felt it, and I knew something felt different. And then my recollection of it now is like, yeah, I knew that was a whole different transition at the end of that game than anything else I'd ever had before.
You take something that you're almost immersed in,
consumes you
for years and years, as much as we try to have a good perspective on it and all that kind of thing, unless you're, super intentional over a long period of time about establishing an identity and your sense of worth apart from just these performance outcomes and this competitive environment. When that faucet gets turned off, it's almost impossible to be like, well, now what? Now, I think if you had a healthier perspective about yourself and your identity and your worth through that, it's easier. But it's still, and even then, after that, it takes real work. Like you've got to shift gears, pivot, whatever you want to call it, and kind of repurpose things. And I think that's where sometimes people don't do that. They didn't do a great job of dealing with purpose and worth during their competitive sports career.
And then you yank that away.
And then it's, this kind of adrenaline rush, dopamine hits over and over and over. You can't, you can play golf for money, play cards for money. It's still not going to approximate walking into an arena.
And well, just to add to your comment of like, even if you are really, really good at identifying those identity and purpose, chances are of someone who started playing when they were 10, that was not a day one foundational thing that was, built for them. And even if you graduate college, let's say you play through college, still 21, 22 when you graduate, you're still a kid. So I feel like the only successful way out from the things that we talk about as far as mental performance is like, unless you had like killer foundations from day one. And even then it's hard to implement those throughout your teenage years and things. For me, I think because I viewed myself early on as like recognizing that as more of a utility player. Like it wasn't like the big, I had moments, I guess, but like I wasn't like the tallest, highest jumper hitter. I wasn't always scoring these like big wow points, but I knew I could go in and get the job done, whatever it was, or I could play a different position. And so I think I had this mindset of utility player, lots of different jobs. At the time, I know my teammates, a lot of them didn't like this, but I was always like the one that could have the conversations with coach and then pass the message along to the team. And I was like the middleman in those things. So I knew those types of skills about me going into the workforce of like how I can work as a team, how I can communicate well, how I can be, agile when one plan doesn't go the way I hoped, and I can quickly shift to another and come up with a new game plan. Part of my fixer mentality, I think, is just how that's my instinct, is to fix things. So I felt like whether I recognized at the time that was part of just my personality and who I am, that was a okay shift for me to move into team environment in sport versus team environment in my job. But it was hard for me to find like that competitive edge went away.
Right.
And you can try to reframe like, oh, well, you're competing with yourself. Still, I had to get a couple licenses for my job. Like, not the same.
No way.
No, and I don't care how you can't talk yourself into that. And be like, oh, yeah, I can compete to get 100 on this test. It wasn't going to happen. Didn't matter. It was not the same. And so the parallel of competition, like in the physical aspect versus competition in a mindset or a mental or a whole different environment, just didn't translate for me. And so for someone who I think had a decent foundation and where I applied myself and my skills in a team setting, take that competitive edge away, and it just wasn't the same.
Yeah. One, I think parents and coaches really need to be aware of this and try to have these kind of conversations with their players all along and help them establish like healthy views of identity and worth. Two, even for me, like I coached for a long time, and I get asked, semi-regularly if I miss coaching. And I don't really, because at least a pretty significant part of why I coached is I'm able to recreate with this kind of work. But there is the part where like you're sick to your stomach on game days.
Right.
That is not there anymore.
Right.
And
at all.
Fortunately for me, I guess, I don't know. I guess I had that experience for a long time, so that I don't know, maybe I didn't need it as much. Or I think I became more interested in trying to help people manage their own situation like that. And that was what did it for me. And I didn't need that sense of impending, clash or whatever.
Yeah.
It was, but it's so different. I mean, forever. I mean, I don't think about those things very often anymore, but if I want to, I can quickly remember like what that looked like, felt like walking out into an arena full of people and we're playing for a state championship or a big qualifier or whatever. Never mind, like on a far greater scale, collegiate situation or a professional situation. It's just, it's addictive.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're chasing throughout this process, and when it comes to a screeching halt, you got to have a plan.
Really unprepared.
And so many people don't.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
Yeah,
tough.
I mean, I don't think anyone ever even talked about the end.
Right.
You know, as the group, the seniors would say, like, it's our last game or it's our last season, but no one ever talked about it's the end and then. And I think for me, it helped. I had a job lined up. Like I knew that I was going to be staying in Raleigh. I had some things that I knew were upcoming. I did a year of grad coaching, so I was still around the sport, which I think helped a little transition to stay in it, but not playing it and shift out. But no one ever talked about your identity in sport, let alone what that was going to be like afterwards. And so there were so many facets too of not just, okay, I'm not getting to compete on a weekly basis anymore or in practice on a daily basis, but the way that you manage your time, the way that you train your body, the way that you fuel your body, the way that you interact with friends or sacrifices that you make, those are all different too. It's not just I think mentally I thought I was just going to stop the competition, but it took me 10, 12 plus years to also get a better relationship with all of those other facets of, I've always enjoyed exercising. I actually found I enjoyed it more after I was done playing, shockingly, which I have to think that was also some level of no one talking about it in the right way for how it was beneficial to my sport. But it took me forever to realize that, like, I don't have to train like I'm playing Division I college volleyball anymore. I thought I had to just go hard every day, bust my butt, burn X number of calories, spend 2 hours in the gym because I wasn't who I was anymore. I didn't need to do that. I wasn't training for that level of play, that level of athleticism. Well, I was, but I didn't need to be. I think that's where a lot of athletes get blindsided. And I've talked to tons of friends, specifically female friends, about the idea surrounding what their diet looked like when they were playing and how their relationship with food went, or their exercise regimen, how they felt about that versus what they wanted to do afterwards. And I think it's just all of these, use the word facets again, but we need to be discussing of it's not just your sport's over. There are lots of other things, components of who you are as a person that made you be able to go on to that level. If you can't manage your time, you can't perform well. If you can't commit to a team and setting, you can't commit to getting up and going to practice. Like those, right? So those are all parts of your personality or your dedication at that point as well. And all of that suddenly just skirt.
Well, I think it's mostly true for people who have gone through this process, playing travel club thing and having this idea of playing collegiately. Then that's a significant number of years where that's been the carrot at the end of the stick that you're chasing. And then once the carrot's eaten, now what? And I think people who maybe just they don't have this idea of like wanting to play in college. So when they're finished with high school, sometimes I think they're more ready for that because their plan has always been to move on to whatever,
something
get
else,
a job or
right.
But I mean, talk to a significant number of former players who, when they ran into that wall at the end of their collegiate career, or even some played a year or two professionally. Some there's still one that's playing a lot still. But they had the similar well, now what? And there is no easy way to come to that place, but there is a better way of dealing with all of this and up to that point. And I think then that gives you some kind of foundation moving forward, where maybe you have a different purpose and your identity isn't Susie the volleyball player. It's Susie who plays volleyball, who plays the piano and goes to school and has a part-time job.
Susie, what's your example?
I don't know why I go with Susie. I remember a friend of mine, Bob Guzzo, who was the wrestling coach at NC State, and he would constantly say, Susie Schmoozy and Sally Schmally. So I picked that up and I never,
just can't stop.
I just can't get away from it. So shout out to Bob,
and Susie,
legend. Well, Susie and Sally, they play huge parts in all of it. But I think you have to examine the reason for your existence, and there's no easy way around that. And so it requires reflection. It requires you coming to some conclusions about who you are, why you're here, what you want to be doing, what is important to you, and how can you serve a cause greater than yourself. That is the giveaway. Right. You can reflect all you want, but if you reflect and you come to the conclusion that I'm going to be the greediest, most self-absorbed, power-hungry maniac, and I'm just going to make as much money as possible. I'm going to steamroll everybody in my path. I'm going to use people all the way to the bitter end. Okay, well, you're not going to find any peace or satisfaction.
Right.
It's just not who we are. So finding a way to come to the conclusion that really believe that I need a higher, more noble cause, purpose for my existence than just producing points on a court or a field. Not that all of that stuff matters.
Yeah, it's not discounting the
I
importance of those at the time.
It's easy for people to take some of this that we say and think it's soft and weak, when in reality, it's just, I think it's the only way forward. Yeah. And I was listening to a podcast episode of What Drives Winning, and Jim Lair was talking. He cited this study where athletes were asked if you could take a pill that you knew was cheating, but you knew you wouldn't get caught, and it would make you a world champion, but you would be dead in 5 years. Would you take the pill? And over half of them said they would take it.
Oh, wow.
And he had mentioned that study in some of his books, but to hear him speak about it, and then he was so emotional, and he just said, what the heck are we doing? And I mean, I get chills right now thinking about, I know I sent that to a friend of ours, Paige Reeve, and she had the same reaction.
Yeah.
We got to that point where she just,
oh my God.
Such an emotional, visceral response to it. And that is the truth.
Yeah.
Like all our eggs go in this one basket.
Yeah.
Well, it's not enough. It's not going to be enough. It might be enough in the short term, but sooner or later, that basket's going to be empty.
Yeah.
And then what? For all of us, we talk about process and excellence and what success look like. The chance to play and compete, those opportunities are pretty brief.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things. And Dan Jansen quote says, if you can use your sport to become a better person, then you've won.
You're winning.
And we don't talk like that.
No.
And, when travel sports or high school sports, parents are losing their minds and coaches are losing their minds and kids are losing their minds. It's because they're not locked in on the most important things. Yeah. We just have to do better. The character development thing, that is real. Yeah. Like if you listen to Mike Krzyzewski talk about it, he talks constantly about the better character you have, the better player you're going to be.
100%.
Anson Dorrance, who just retired. What drives winning? Character development. The All Blacks. Better people make better All Blacks. Wildly successful New Zealand rugby team. It's not weak to talk like that. It's hard. Well, working on your character is hard.
Yeah.
I'll be the first
any self-work is hard.
I'll vouch for it because I got lots of work to do.
Well, we've talked about that's a never ending. You don't be like, I think I've got myself. I'm fixed. I'm good. Like there's never, and that is not right. A finite process. And again, that goes on with that idea of if you have a goal that has sponsored by Coca-Cola. I really feel like if you view anything as a finite goal, then you're going to keep reaching for something else. So whether that's your sport or whether that's getting a college scholarship or that is, like you said, I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to fix some things. I'm going to try to better myself. Well, at no point are you like, okay, I'm as good as I can be. Like most people aren't going to be satisfied with that. And I at least feel like at a minimum, most people who have come from a competitive sports environment aren't going to ever be satisfied. Like, yeah, I think we're in good shape. But as you're talking about this, I'm also thinking about it's an identity shift regardless of the foundation of your identity that you have. Whether you had someone that fostered that for you from an early start or at some point, in your mid-teens, you discovered that this was important to do character building outside of just performance. It's not just your sport that ends, but you have 2/3 of your life left after this, and B, way more big time life events that are going to continue to happen, that are going to shift your identity and maybe shift your purpose a little bit for a while. That idea of bettering yourself or striving for excellence, it's never ending because you go through those various stages where, okay, now my focus is on my kids. 10 years ago, I could focus on my job. I could work long hours because I had nothing else that was a responsibility to come home to. And so just recognizing that it's not one single narrow goal forever that you're always chasing that one, but if it's just excellence in whatever it is we're doing today, wherever I'm at today, whatever stage of life I'm in, whatever role I'm in, excellence in that one keeps that wheel turning.
Your purpose, it's going to keep changing. And I think that's even like from a parenting standpoint. Sometimes parents get really weepy when their kids are going off to first grade.
Weeping.
I'm just kidding. Or, they're going into middle school. And I remember like the first time I watched my daughter walk down the hall by herself. You're not going to not feel
feelings about that, right?
But that doesn't mean I want
it to not happen.
Right. I don't want to stay there. The role of parent, to me, it's very similar to the role of coach. You want to prepare them so that they can become independent, strong, good, brave, compassionate citizens.
Of society, right.
So it's fun to watch them grow and learn and get better. And at some point, they're going to leave.
And they should. And you got to be okay with that. The whole point is to set them free.
Exactly. So even then, if you're 18, 20 plus years, you're viewing yourself only as parent, not a good plan.
Right.
Because at some point, you're not playing that role anymore. Right. Like you still have, obviously, that relationship, but it's different dynamic. And hopefully they don't need you. Like that's
hopefully
the whole
they're raising
point.
good adults that when they are adults, they become.
So to me, just like coaching, you want to prepare them so they can go stand on their own. And you can just kick back and watch and say, man, that was a great job. Yeah. Loved watching you do your thing. But that's where you have to keep going back to it. You have to think about who you are, who you're becoming, and why. What do you want to do with all this? What kind of person are you going to be? To quote Anson Dorrance again, then you're living on the ascension where everything is just improving. You're getting better. You're learning, right to the last breath. Then you don't get swamped by these waves of change.
By no means are we saying that if you're striving for that you aren't going to have waves of change, but they don't totally rock you and ruin you to where you can't step out of it at the end. You will have challenges. You will have phases of life that are difficult and phases that are great and wonderful, and same in your sport where it's going to be ups and downs. But the more you can identify, and I think that was something for me, and I talked about this. I still don't really know how I got to be a thinker like this, but I feel like I recognized pretty early that I might be that type of utility player or not be like the hardest hitter. And I was like, okay, so then what can I do to still love this game and still stand out in a way to my team or my coaches or myself that I'm proud of? And so I developed different skills. I always say I think I could coach the game better than I could necessarily play the game. Like I know it really, really well, or I did. I don't well, maybe a little squeaky these days. But I always I knew that if I couldn't be on the court and physically running the plays, that I knew that if we had to call timeout, I was prepared for something that we could help the game. And so I feel like that's one of those skills that has taken me. But I'm always thinking about like what's next, and just in case, like the backup plan. That was something that did really, really well for me in sport, but prepared me for work, prepared me for relationships, prepared me for parenting, to always be on the lookout for other things to be paying attention to, because you can't be too narrow lensed or else you're going to miss what else is going on. And so it's not that you're not going to experience those waves of difficulty or those waves of struggle or those waves of really, really greatness, but they're not going to last forever. And so I think always being dynamic to recognize, okay, this is where I'm at now. Like, what can I do to walk through this cloud or walk through this rainbow and get to the other side, and recognize that it's temporary. If I can stick to the things that I know are core about me, core about how I handle things, core about what I want in my life. If you have that view of what's next or what's more to come, then you don't get totally dragged down by those things.
Ideally, I mean, those are things you're supposed to be learning in the sport experience. And that means you have to be willing to watch them struggle. Mm-hmm. That's the only way they learn and get tougher and stronger, is by struggling. That might mean they're not a starter, or that might mean they get cut. What are you going to do about it? And
are you going to sit there and mope with them?
Right.
Or are you going to tell them how to shift this into a lesson?
Yeah. Come back harder, stronger, better, tougher. I think sometimes that's an element of the sport experience that we're not providing or not allowing to happen to our kids.
Well, and I feel like, as I keep going back to parenting, but I can't help but think about this because I've got the age of my children at 4 and 6. We're in this very like shaping how do we act when things happen. The other day we're playing bingo. They each had a win. Everyone's excited, and then he lost again. He lost his freaking mind. I don't like this game. She's cheating. She all the things. Total tantrum. And it would be way easier to be like, oh well, you should let him win. Like a lot of people do that. Right. Oh, let him win. You're better. Whatever. But ultimately, what I want to teach him is that if you're going to play a game, you might win or you might lose, and you can't lose your ever-loving mind when you lose bingo and then expect that when you win, everyone cheers for you. That's not how that works. And I feel like the sooner that you can teach those lessons and let them work through, this is not the right response, and teach a little lesson, it becomes natural for them to do that. He had 2 more games where he lost his mind again. And then by the 4th one, he gave my daughter a high five, and he said, that's okay, we don't cry about it. But I do feel like, as coaches, as players, like when you give your players or you give your children, you give them the tools for how to repair it themselves and do it better next time, or learn the lesson and how to prepare to not let this happen again because it tore them up so bad. The earlier you can instill those skills in them, the sharper they're going to make them over time. Because it's not like you fix one downfall and that's the last one they ever have. You fix a couple for them, and then you teach them the skill to do it on their own, and they become way less impactful.
Well, I know I got a text this morning to a friend of mine, ours. His 3-year-old daughter, and a friend was getting ready to lift weights at home. It was going to be very hard. She trained really hard. And she made a point of telling her daughter, like, I don't feel like doing this. I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it anyway. Yep. And
dedication over motivation.
The fact that she's learning at 3, that it doesn't matter if you feel like doing it. You have to do it. You're going to do it. And that's it. That's what's required.
Right.
And I just thought that was such a cool story.
Yeah.
And that's what we should be doing, teaching our kids that there are going to be hard things. You have to run to them anyway.
And by explaining to them why they're good for you.
Right.
There's an episode of Bluey where, Bluey. Did your kids ever watch Bluey?
Never heard of it.
Oh, you missed out. It's actually a tolerable kids show. Anyway, it's a kids cartoon. And there's this episode where family's getting ready to head out the door for the morning. And the mom's like, brush your teeth, brush your hair, put your bag away, tie your shoes. And the kids are like, you keep bossing me around. And the parents are like, we're not bossing you. We're just telling you to do the things that you need to get done. So they shift to get in the car, and the dad turns on the navigation system to give him directions for where he needs to go. And so the dad, suddenly the navigation's calling out like, it's 1,000 feet, turn left. And he doesn't turn left. He's like, no, forget it. I'm gonna keep going straight. And the kids are like, Dad, it said turn left. And so he goes through that sort of like teaching the lesson of, if I ignore the satellite, I won't get to my destination. If I ignore it because I think she's bossing me around, then I will never get to my destination. And so that's how he teaches the kids the lesson of, I'm not being bossy. I'm just teaching you what is right for you to get to the end goal. While it's a children's cartoon episode, it's a decent way to explain. Just like you said, you're not always going to be motivated to go exercise. You're not going to always be motivated to get up early and get to work on time. You're not always going to be motivated to keep your house. Like, it's way easier to show up late to work, not exercise, eat pizza, and never do your laundry.
Do whatever you feel
way
like
easier. Yeah. Way easier just to like let all those things go. But is your life more chaotic? Are you respected in the workplace? Do you feel like you're treating your body well and you're healthy? So establishing those things early, hey, we're dedicated to these things because they're good for us. And a lot of people always say, well, you always seem so motivated. How are you so? And they're always like, I'm not always motivated, but I'm dedicated to what I know my goals are on the back end. And that's an easy
discipline.
It's an easy application in that kind of environment. But anything where you're disciplined or you're dedicated to it doesn't need to be, you have to push through.
Well, either you're going to just be the kind of person who does whatever you feel like doing, which means you remain an infant, or you're going to become harder, better, tougher, more resilient, more able to carve out your own place in this world. Yeah. And it requires hard things.
Yeah.
Like that's whatever the title of the book, Steve Magnus, Brett Stolberg, they wrote. Do hard things.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
Yeah, it's a podcast called We Can Do Hard Things. You said the book. Like Mel Robbins, I think I talked about this once at one point about she was doing cold plunges in the morning. And she's like, I don't even know if this is good for me, but I know I don't want to do it. So I'm going to teach myself that I can do things that are hard for me and that I think I don't want to do. Not because I think that cold plunging is like going to be a life skill for me, but because it's just something that I can tangibly do and teach myself that I can do things that I'm not motivated to do. I don't seem to enjoy doing, but I can do them anyway. And I think sometimes that gets a little foggy with people being like, well, if you don't want to do something, then don't do it. We're not saying like you need to go be the world's strongest bodybuilder or that you need to never eat carbs, like some stupid things. But just teaching yourself so that when you do face normal life adversity, you have the skills and you've done the rewiring of the brain. Teach yourself, I can get through this hard phase.
Well, if your entire existence is all about, I'm just going to do what I want to do. Well, good luck with that. And doing things you don't like to do, it's good for you.
Yeah.
Like there are a million physiological reasons, brain reasons why you want to at least have something in your day that you don't want to do. Yes. And you just do it. It's crucial, though, that it's something you don't want to do. If you love to exercise, well, that's
easy.
That's not what we're talking about then.
Right.
The other day I was at this business and routinely they have boxes of donuts there when I come to talk, and I'm smelling these donuts the whole time. I'm looking at them. If I just did what I wanted to do, I would have laid waste to those.
Sure.
But I didn't. And that's good.
You're better off for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another guy in there who was fighting the same battle, and we were just kind of laughing to each other about the predicament we're in.
I think it's always interesting too when you have just made it, like, for example, I'm not going to have donuts. Donuts aren't bad.
Sure they are.
Having a donut from time to time is not going to kill you.
You're right, correct.
Donuts have zero benefit. You're right. But it's not to say like donuts are bad.
I still remember Megan Hodges' mom talking to us at Triangle about nutrition, and she said there's one food out there that you should
donuts
never
are hands
eat.
Down like the worst. Zero nutritional value.
Donuts.
100%.
Plus it goes the other way.
Like, I mean, the enjoyment of having a donut is not a bad thing, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
People will be like, oh, well, you're no fun. It's like I've had phases where I decide I'm not going to drink alcohol for a month, or just because I think it's a good thing to do. Well, if you're out and your friends are drinking, and you say I'm not drinking tonight. I mean, they are so irritated with you because you have to join into the thing. So like if you decide, and we always go back to diet and exercise, but those tend to be things that people decide they want to do for themselves that may not be in line with their peers or their work friends or their group of social friends. And you're going to face those like, oh, you're too good for us. You can't have a donut.
Yes, I am. No, just kidding.
But like that, but it's that kind of A, can we not just make a decision for ourselves without you having to have an opinion about it?
Yep.
But B, that is the dedication, discipline, whatever D word you want to use for it. If you've made a decision to do something that you know is for the betterment of yourself, you also have to be prepared not just for your own discipline to stick with that, but to also fight the other people, the haters, if you will, who are going to either for their own self-sabotage reasons want to give you crap about it, or just because it's fun for them. But there are going to be those challenges where, hey, this is what I've decided is best for me. I don't judge people for having it doesn't do. Like, I don't care. If you have something to do, by all means. But that is another facet of just having to understand, like, you're going to make these decisions that might be out of the norm for the average person. It kind of goes back, like, do you want to be the average person?
Well, then you wonder how much these people really care about me. And I was never a drinker. I never liked it. But I remember being at parties. I would just hold a beer.
Just because people wouldn't.
So that way,
they'd shut up.
People wouldn't, hey, can I get you another beer all night long? Or, hey, what are you drinking? I would just always nurse the same beer and drink almost none of it. It's not for any great moral reason. I just didn't really like it.
Right.
So why do I have to drink something I don't like?
Right.
Just to make everybody feel better?
Like, well, and it's always with things that are, notably bad for you. Drinking too much, eating too many donuts, like not exercise, all these things that I think people give you crap about it because they know deep down you're making the right choice and they're making the bad one. And it makes them feel better to give you crap for it. Yeah. How did we even get to that? What are we talking about?
I don't know.
Get here?
You're all over the place.
Me?
You're like a crazy person.
You mentioned donuts. No, you were talking about the example of doing hard things because it's the right thing to do for you, and the donut examples where you kind of came in. But doing hard things is not just a mental challenge with yourself. It is a mental challenge with people's opinions of it, with people's views of it. How dare you decide to better yourself and it impacts somebody else? People don't like when you change. People don't, especially people that have known you for a long time. It makes them uncomfortable when you start changing how you are, changing how you view things, or setting boundaries, if you will. But if you can get comfortable, if this is what I know is best for me, and if you don't like it, sorry, but I'm not going to change what I think is right for me. That just makes you more empowered in the change. It makes you on a better path, because the sooner you can cut the fat, if you will, the sooner you're going to start being able to progress on those goals for yourself. I've had so many things in my life where people were like, oh, well, that's the right idea. Well, that's not what I read, right? Who cares? Like, if you are dedicated to your mission, to your goal, whether that's diet and exercise or eating every donut that's on the table.
I think it's more, like I remember Chris Rock talking about this in a stand-up routine forever ago. The more you try to rise above your circumstances, the people who aren't doing that, the more they're going to try and keep you from doing that. Yes. I don't want to create this like paranoid sense of they're all out to get me. But I'm not okay with, well, this is just who I am. No, be better.
Be better. Right.
Learn, grow.
But that's your choice to do that. And if you make shifts and changes, quiet the noise. Like that is you and your internal.
Right.
And yes, 100%. This is not who I am forever, never going to progress. But whatever version of me I am today, whether that's me being 1% better every day, like this is who I am. I'm bringing this to the table. And if you aren't on board, then like don't get in my way.
She's a former Division I athlete, volleyball player, but she's really committed to training, like physical training. She still plays sand volleyball, but she loves being strong. She loves training hard. And like for a woman who's tall, you can find people who will criticize you for that.
For sure.
And I think that's gross.
Super gross.
So I'm always like pro, go for it, be as strong as you can be. And anybody who wants to discourage you from doing that, you just blow right past them, because there are plenty of people who
are the big giant middle finger.
There you go. There are plenty of people who are willing to clap and applaud and are going to be inspired by what you're doing. And that's where you need to keep your focus. There'll always be some naysayers. And
I think the people who are going to applaud you and be inspired by you are the ones that you're going to change.
Sure.
By doing what you're doing and sticking to understanding that this is a passion or something that drives you. It's the naysayers that you're not going to change. So if you put way too much time in convincing the naysayers of why they should support you and appreciate what you're doing and think this is actually a great idea, then it's a major wasted breath. Everyone's like, don't read the comments, don't fight back to negative comments. Like it's a waste of your breath.
Right.
Ride the wave of the people that support you and that love what you're doing, regardless of what it is. And that's going to take you way further because those people that love you and support you are the ones that you're going to make a bigger impact on. The people that talk crap and try to tear you down, you're not going to change their mind because they just don't like you.
Well, I still remember listening to Jack Carr on Joe Rogan's podcast, and Jack Carr is now a novelist after being a Navy SEAL for 20 years and very successful novelist. He will still read comments about his books, and Joe Rogan was like super quick to say, "Oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that." And Joe Rogan, he was like, "I never,
hell no,
like it just doesn't happen." And I think Jack Carr talked about why he likes to thank people who read his work, and
right, because if you just ignore everything, then you ignore the good too. Right.
So, but he does admit, but the one comment out of 100 that is
that's the one you
negative, that's the one that I latch onto, and it keeps me awake. So you just have to be very careful about those kind of inputs, and instead choose to live on that ascension. And if people get it, great. If they don't get it, great. But that you still keep rolling. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unbound Performance Podcast.
Your support helps us continue to build our community. If you're enjoying this content, please like, subscribe, and share.